They say that only the certain people really know what happened to the Black Dahlia, those being the killer and Elizabeth Short herself. And well, since we can't ask the victim, I guess that means that we are left with only one option. Let's talk about it. This is the first installment of my series called Famous Cases in 6 Minutes, where I will take famous criminal cases from all across the world and attempt to explain them fully in under 6 minutes. This is obviously going to be pretty difficult, but a challenge I am more than willing to accept. So let's just get straight into it. In 1947, America was completely enamored with this woman. Her name was Elizabeth Short, and she had been found brutally murdered in Los Angeles. The case immediately became one of the most popular in American history. That was because Elizabeth Short's body had been cut into halves, both horizontally and vertically, creating for total quadrants of her body. She was then displayed like this on a street corner. The police were baffled by this crime scene, and nobody had any idea who could have done such a thing. That was until they received this letter. It came from someone calling themselves the Black Dahlia. In the letter, the sender claimed that they had killed Elizabeth Short, stating that he or she had even cut open her chest and removed her heart. The writer went on to explain that they would soon be killing again and provided a description of their next target. Immediately, the police started to believe that this must have been the work of a serial killer, especially after receiving further letters, claiming that the Black Dahlia had also killed several other women. Of course, none of these letters contained any real clues, and the killer only seemed to want attention. It didn't take long for the Black Dahlia case to become a nationwide sensation. Reporters were everywhere asking anyone and everyone if they had seen anything. People wrote letters to the police, and the FBI set up a special task force just to try and solve the case. But unfortunately, the killer was really good at what they did. There was zero physical evidence that could link them to the crime. They had no witnesses, and there was absolutely nothing that could help the police identify them. So the case went cold. For quite some time, the police weren't sure if Elizabeth Short had even been the first victim. After all, the Black Dahlia had said that she wouldn't be the last. Eventually, another body turned up that appeared to have been mutilated in the same way as Elizabeth. However, the corpse was far too decomposed to tell if this was definitely the case. Sadly, though, this would not be the end of the story. Fast forward a few years, and suddenly the police were dealing with yet another murder that bore striking similarities to the Black Dahlia case. A young woman had been found dead on the side of a highway, and once again, her body had been mutilated and cut into quarters. This time, however, something very important was found at the scene. There was a license plate that had come off of the killer's car, which gave the police their first lead in over 20 years. Unfortunately, the man whose license plate had been left behind was not the killer. He had simply parked his car in the same place as the killer and had no idea that his license plate had come off. The investigation continued without any real success, and within just a few years, the case went cold again. Now, even though the case had gone cold twice before, the police never gave up hope of catching the killer. In 1976, almost 30 years after the Black Dahlia murder, 2 men came forward claiming to have witnessed the crime. According to the men, they had been driving past the Leimert Park when they saw a man holding a bloody meat cleaver. They described this man as being tall and thin with red hair. He was wearing a blue suit and looked like he was around 35 years old. Although the description given by the men was fairly vague, it did give the police one promising lead: the man's distinctive car. According to the men, the killer had gotten into a 1938 Plymouth business coupe, and as they knew, there was a record of every car that had ever been sold. So the police started contacting former owners of 1938 Plymouth business coupes in an attempt to track down the real owner. As you might expect, this was a very long shot, but hey, anything was worth trying at this point. And amazingly, this actually paid off. It turned out that one of the cars had been sold to a man matching the description given by the witnesses. His name was George Hodel, and the police wasted no time in arresting him. During his trial, the prosecution claimed that George Hodel was a confirmed bachelor. This meant that he was alone at the time of the murder and therefore the most likely suspect. To add to this, he was known for being violent towards women, and he even had a history of assaulting nurses while they were on their way home from work. The defense, however, tried to argue that there was no solid evidence against their client and that the witnesses could easily be mistaken. They also pointed out that there were hundreds of men in Los Angeles who owned a 1938 Plymouth business coupe, and George Hodel had merely been the one that the witnesses recognized. Ultimately, however, It was the witness's word against George's, and the jury found him guilty. But wait a second. If George Hodel was arrested in 1976, how come Elizabeth Short was killed in 1947? Well, the truth is that George Hodel was released in 1977 due to lack of evidence. He then went on to live a normal life and died in 1999. Now, if you don't understand what I'm getting at, let me spell it out for you. George Hodel was never the killer. So who was? Well, if you've watched my other videos, you may already know the answer. If not, let me introduce you to Mark Hansen. According to him, he was the killer. He made over 50 confessions to the police and even drew pictures explaining how he had committed the murders. He even led the police to the places where he had buried some of his victims, including Elizabeth Short, to prove that he was guilty. Sadly, none of these confessions were ever taken seriously, and Mark Hansen died in 2001 believing that he would never get justice for his crimes. There are still some people who claim that Mark Hansen was innocent, but that doesn't really matter because we will probably never know who the real killer was. Maybe it was Mark Hansen, maybe it was George Hodel, maybe it was someone else entirely. We may never know. As I said before, the reason that this case received so much attention was because of the brutality of the crime. But that isn't the only reason why everyone was so obsessed. You see, this wasn't the first time that a beautiful woman had been found brutally murdered. Just a year earlier, another young woman had been found dead in Chicago. Her name was Jean Simmons, and she had been stripped, beaten, and strangled to death. Then, in 1949, yet another woman was found dead in New York City. Her name was Suzanne D. Vale, and she had been bludgeoned to death with a heavy object. These three murders would go down in history as the first of many crimes committed by a man named Richard Ramirez. I've covered the Night Stalker case in a previous video, so if you want to learn more about that, feel free to check it out. But for now, I think that's a good place to wrap up this video. What do you think happened in the Black Dahlia case? Who do you think was the real killer? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and please remember to subscribe if you want to see more videos like these. Also, here's a video that I made about a similar case that you may like. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.